Hello and welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Tyler, and no, in fact, the sky is not falling in Baltimore. The Orioles have won a baseball game after losing five straight. They take the finale of a series with the Guardians, still lose the series, but win a game after getting swept by the Astros. It feels good. It feels significant that the Orioles did not get swept back to back, and rather it just feels like maybe there's a little bit of a hangover from that series in New York last week. So we are thankful for that. I'm going to talk about a little bit of that on this episode, maybe what we learned about the Orioles in that losing streak. And then I want to get into what I think a lot of people have talked about this week is just how great Gunnar Henderson has been this year. We're basically at the halfway point of the season, so it feels like an appropriate time to pause and get a little perspective on just how good one of the Baltimore Orioles players has been to this point because, spoiler alert, he's been very, very good. But before we get into that, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor of this episode, and it's the same sponsor we've had for a couple weeks now. That sponsor is Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, you can head on over to the website, betonline.ag, for an online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with over 150 slot games. So head to the website today, that's betonline.ag, to get in on the action, and you can use the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Thanks to Bet Online for the support. So, first, let's talk about the losing streak. It happened. The Orioles lost 5 in a row. First to a Houston Astros team that was sub 500 when that series happened. They are now 500 as I record this episode and ascending. And I think if you look at the talent on that roster, you would have expected them to be much better this season, but it's not entirely dissimilar to how they played last year. Ended up winning the AL West, but then falling in the playoffs to the Texas Rangers, who had taken the wild card in the West, and kind of everybody lost to the Rangers that way. But the Astros are a much better team, I think, than what they'd shown to this point. And then the Guardians, who have been a buzzsaw all season. Yes, they're in a weak division in the AL Central, but the Guardians are a very good team. They've won a bunch of games. They have, I think, the second best record in baseball now that this series is over, right behind the New York Yankees. 51-27 at the end of this series. A very, very good baseball team. So I think in that perspective, look, the Orioles didn't lose to a bunch of schlubs here. They lost to two good baseball teams. In the case of the Astros, a team that's better than their record has shown, and in the Guardians, a team that is as good as their record shows. And the Guardians are going to make the playoffs. The Astros might make the playoffs. Like, there is no shame in that. It's 162 games. We know the Orioles have had a rash of pitching injuries. We've kind of seen that bear out in this losing streak a little bit. Not all of the pitchers that got beat around were the bad pitchers or the subpar, the non-front line starters, but those guys certainly didn't pitch well. So the Orioles got exposed a little bit in that losing streak, I think, in that way. But we aren't exactly surprised by that. At least I don't think most Orioles fans are surprised by that. When you lose a Cy Young caliber pitcher in Kyle Bradish, when you lose really quality depth pieces in John Means and Tyler Wells, although, Wells hasn't pitched for a long time at this point. Means had been pitching. But anyway, losing those three guys is going to hurt. And then Dean Kramer has been on the IL for, to me, much longer than I anticipated when he first went on the IL. He's still not back as I record this on June 27th, when we got an update from Mike Elias weeks ago at this point that it looked like Kramer would be pitching in June. Maybe he still does, but we're running out of time for that to happen as we are recording on the 27th of June here. So maybe that proves to not be the case. He did not pitch well in his most recent rehab start, so he may still get another one to see if they can stretch him out a little bit more. But, when you lose 4 MLB caliber starters in quick succession, your starting pitching is going to be a little bit thin. The fact that the Orioles are still, rolling along a little bit here is to be commended. And what I will say is if this is going to happen, it's good for it to happen on June 27th versus August 27th. The Orioles have time to figure this out. There is a trade deadline still to come. Now, pitching, I think, is going to be, it's always expensive, but I think it's going to be particularly expensive at this year's deadline because there's a lot of mediocrity in baseball. I think the Orioles are right up there with the Guardians and the Yankees as the elite of the AL. Then there's a lot of room, and then there's a lot of okay teams that are going to make up the majority of the playoff field. And all of those teams are going to be vying for what looks to be a limited number of starting pitching options. So it's not that it's good news that the Orioles have to shop for starting pitching, but it was already assumed when those injuries happened that they needed to go do something. And I think this losing streak sort of solidifies, like, yes, this team is still very good. The Orioles still scored a bunch of runs in a couple of these games. Yes, there were some days where the offense could have done a little bit more. But if you look at the 10,000-foot view, this offense is really good. Cedric Mullins is heating up. Gunnar Henderson, we're going to talk about him. He's an MVP candidate right now. This offense is good. The offense is not the problem. The pitching needs to step things up, not only in the rotation, but in the bullpen as well, where we knew we were a little bit thin coming into the season without Felix Bautista. Now Danny Coulombe's out for quite a while. The bullpen needs some help as well. And fortunately, the Orioles have resources internally to address those things, not just the top level prospects, which, I will say this too, that is thinning a little bit at this point too, not because the players aren't panning out, kind of the opposite. A lot of these really good players are ascending to the major leagues and soon won't be prospects. They'll be part of the core. And, you're not necessarily going to deal a guy that has now become a cornerstone of your franchise. Jordan Westburg, I think a year ago, you could have looked at Jordan Westburg and said, hey, is he a trade piece? Is he a big league guy? We don't really know. We got Joey Ortiz in the mix. Which way we're going to go? They made that decision. Ortiz was getting shipped out. That got him Corbin Burns. Westburg is going to be in the lineup every day. He's an all-star, essentially. He might not make the all-star team, but his production has been at an all-star level. They've got a similar thing going on now with Heston Kjerstad. Colton Cowser's been in the big league lineup all year. Now Kjerstad's up. What are they going to do with him? Okay, we're gonna dedicate our resources to Cowser. Now Kjerstad's available. Let's go get that ace. And then you've got more depth guys like Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby. These are guys that, are they gonna be fixtures in the major league picture? If they're not, then it feels like the time to deal them is right about now. And those could be the types of talents that get you the bullpen help you need. So the Orioles have these types of talents that can make them better. And now they've got this 1 month runway to say, okay, let's evaluate ourselves. Let's evaluate the field, and let's figure out what moves get us the best value for the resources that we have. Because, it's been talked about for a long time. The Orioles didn't have a ton of pitching in the minor leagues. I think they've found something with Cade Povich a little bit, that they got him from the Twins. He's turning into a big league starter. That's great. Maybe Chase McDermott follows. They got him in, I think, that Trey Mancini trade a couple years ago. Seth Johnson is on the 40-man, still at Double A. Maybe he turns into something later in the year. Like, they've got some guys, but these are not the high-level difference makers you need in a season where you're making a World Series push. They've got to go get those guys, and I hope that they will, because they really need another guy. I don't know that they need another Corbin Burns level talent, but I think they need a 2, a 3 in the rotation to go into the playoffs feeling pretty fearsome. And that's a half season away still, but you got to get there, and you got to feel comfortable when you get there. So I'm excited that the losing streak is over. I'm not necessarily upset that it happened. It exposed some things that I think we already sort of felt bubbling below the surface. I'm sure Elias and his lieutenants felt that too, but now it's sort of to the point you can't really ignore it anymore. The Orioles need pitching help, and I think they will go and get it. There's some variance there in terms of the quality that they go get. I think the bullpen, you'll probably see them go get a guy, and then maybe a much lower tier guy that they maybe like some characteristics on and can mold a little bit. And then I think on the pitching front, they could go get a veteran type guy, and you try to cobble things together in that game 3 of a series. I'd much prefer they go get a guy that you feel entirely confident in going through an order 2 times in the playoffs, because you're not going to go crazy here, but going 2 times through a lineup in the playoffs and getting you through 5 innings, 6 innings. 6 innings would be a perfect game, but you get what I mean. You feel confident in that guy. I don't think they have that guy right now in house. I'm not sure you're gonna find that guy in house at all. That's gonna be external. So that's kind of my read on the losing streak. Certainly nothing to be overly alarmed by. They didn't play well as a unit, but there were elements there that felt pretty good. And now they have a Texas Rangers team this weekend who has certainly played below their, defending world champion billing to this point, but obviously has underlying talent there that could break out at any point. Two of the games this weekend are on national television. I think Saturday is on Fox. Sunday is on ESPN. Camden Yards gets to be in prime time. That's pretty cool. So we'll see there. But yeah, not entirely discouraged. And I think we've learned some things here about the team, and they've also shown us some things by bouncing back, getting the win, and now sounds very sports radio call in of me to say, but this builds some toughness a little bit. A lot of this roster now has that history of getting swept in the playoffs last year. Now they've got this bad taste of this 5-game losing streak. They've been swept twice this year after not being swept for 2 years. Like maybe there's some little element of people are looking at us as if we are lesser than we used to be, but in fact, we're much better than we've ever been before, and now we're battle tested. And maybe there's something to that in the psyche of a professional athlete. I'm not sure, but not discouraged by the Orioles on this 5-game losing streak. And in addition, and part of that is that the New York Yankees have equally sucked, essentially. The Orioles are just 1 game behind. When they left the Bronx a week ago, they were a half a game behind. Now they're 1 game behind. They basically lost no ground because, remember, they don't have the tiebreaker over the Yankees just yet because those teams still have to play a few more times, but they are on their way to getting that tiebreaker. And if and when they do get that, they will essentially have a half game extra in the standings compared to the Yankees throughout the year. So, take with that what you will. But the Orioles are in pretty good shape here despite the 5-game losing streak, and you have to feel good about that. All right, now let's move on to the second topic, and it's something that I think a lot of people are touching on right now, and that's simply Gunnar Henderson. I think we've all understood that Gunnar Henderson is having a fantastic season. He's right up there with Aaron Judge right now in terms of MVP consideration. I think, if you look at the Orioles, they are a much deeper team that has a lot of ways to win, whereas the Yankees have sort of a singular way to win right now, which is their top 3 hitters of Volpe, Soto, and Judge produce, or else the Orioles or else the Yankees lose that game. So maybe that gives Judge the edge. I don't know. But as an Orioles fan who watches Gunnar Henderson every single day, I can tell you that in terms of all-around game, Gunnar Henderson is by far the more electric player simply because he can hit home runs like Judge. Now Judge has a few more. I'll give him that. But right up there, Henderson is playing elite defense at shortstop with a cannon for an arm. And oh yeah, he can kind of take any bag he wants. And he is amazing at taking the extra base at all times because he's not maybe the absolute fastest guy on the field, but he's in like the top 10 or 12% or whatever. And he's like a master at going first to third or scoring from second on a hard liner into the outfield. It's something that not all players do. It's something that not Aaron Judge does because Judge, as a bigger guy, a more muscular guy, an older guy, not quite as fast. Certainly not a knock on him. He does a lot of things really well for that Yankees team. But in terms of like every single element of a baseball game, Gunnar Henderson is a firecracker, I think, unlike any other you can find in baseball right now. We know all that. But when you get up close, it can be tough to get the perspective on it historically. And I think a lot of people have started talking about this. So this is not a unique perspective that I'm providing, but I found it interesting to look through the numbers because he is just so good. And he's to the point that, as an Oriole fan, born in 1993, when I was very young, the Orioles were very good. And I, of course, was not paying attention at all because I always say like the age of 7 is kind of when my sports watching sort of started. I really did not care prior to 7 years old. And I think that's probably pretty typical for most people. Your consciousness and what you care about is limited to that point. And at 7, I just distinctly remember, that was the year the Ravens won the Super Bowl when I was 7 turning 8. The Orioles, I remember going to those games when, in retrospect, the Orioles were terrible, but I remember getting the little guides at the park with all the players in it and, coming to like admire these players that, maybe historically will not be super relevant, but like to my baseball watching, career or whatever you want to call it, are like very special to me. And that's like guys like Melvin Mora and Tony Batista early on. And that was like all me and all the other kids doing his batting stances. And, I remember Luis Matos back in the day. And now I think his son or his nephew or something is in the league. Like, those are the guys that I understand historically, probably not the best players of all time. Now, Melvin Mora was, I think, had some fantastic seasons, but a lot of these guys are going to be lost to the annals of history, and nobody will care about them in 100 years, whereas a guy like Babe Ruth will be relevant for as long as there's a game of baseball. But anyway, that's the history I come from, which is to say that it's a lot of bad baseball up until 2012, when I was then in college at that point. So I'd been watching baseball for, 10 years, 15 years, something like that, when the Orioles finally got good. And that's when the Manny Machado era starts, and the JJ Hardy and Adam Jones and all these guys that I think for a lot of people of my age are the best Orioles of their, conscious lifetime. And I think Manny Machado, for many of us, is the most talented player that any of us have seen. Again, if you're like 25 to 35-year-old, we kind of just missed Cal Ripken's prime a little bit. Of course, we understand how special he is, but we're basically Cal Ripken's son's age. You know what I mean? So we didn't really get to see all the best years. So to us, you have to shift it a little bit. And Manny Machado, just in terms of like pound for pound talent, I would make the argument is the most talented Oriole of my lifetime until now. And Gunnar Henderson is very quickly unseating Machado as the most talented Baltimore Oriole since Cal Ripken Jr. And he's also on pace to potentially have the single best season of a Baltimore Oriole of all time. I'm not going to give him the mantle of best Oriole ever because, look, he's a young guy, got all the potential to be that guy, but Cal is Cal, Brooks is Brooks, Frank is Frank, Jim is Jim. These aren't guys that you throw away after a year and say, no, this kid wearing number 2 is better than all of them. But on a single season basis, he is on pace to do something that none of them have ever done. So I want to look at his numbers and just talk about that a little bit, because we're basically at the halfway point. The Orioles have played 80 games, not 81, but essentially with all of his numbers, at least his counting stats, you can double them, and that will give you what his full season stats are going to be. So after 80 games, he has a 5.9 baseball reference WAR, which that doubles to 11.8 on the season. And if you look at the best single season WAR of an Orioles position player ever, that's going to be Cal Ripken Jr. in 1991, which was 11.5 WAR. 11.8 is higher than 11.5. So that would make Gunnar Henderson the single best season by an Orioles position player already. He's certainly, unless the bottom falls out, which of course I don't want this to be like the broadcaster's jinx, the podcaster's jinx, but you got to talk about what you got to talk about. But he's comfortably going to get into the top 10. And that includes a couple seasons from the St. Louis Browns era Orioles franchise of George Sisler in the 20s and Ken Williams in the 20s. So in terms of the names you actually know, he's going to be above guys like Brooks and early career Cal, and Frank Robinson's not even on the top 10. Like, he's going to be in there amongst the greats at the very least, and very possibly above them. But then you look at, home runs. He's at 26 home runs. Like, that'd be a great season for a shortstop. That's a stellar season. You'd say that's a power hitting shortstop hitting 26 home runs in a season. He's done in 80 games, which you double it, makes him on pace for 52 home runs for the Baltimore Orioles. If I look at number of home runs in a season, the all-time single season leader for the Orioles is Chris Davis with 53 in 2013. So Gunnar is on pace to be one behind that. And, I love prime Chris Davis, but Chris Davis was a power hitter that played first base and didn't exactly offer you a lot on the base paths. Gunnar's on pace to hit that many and do all of these amazing things outside of just hitting home runs, which is incredible. And then just the slash line, 288 batting average, 387 on base, 618 slugging for a 1.005 .5 OPS. The 1.005 right now is tied for the 8th best in a single season by a Baltimore Oriole, tied with Boog Powell in 1964. And again, that includes some 1920s stuff. So if you take away the 1920s, it would be tied for 5th overall. I'm sorry, no, 4th, because the number one in franchise history is George Sisler in 1920 with a 1.082. So he's a top 4 player in terms of on-base percentage, or on-base plus slugging in Orioles history, not necessarily franchise history. Then you talk about the defense. Like, look at, if you're a more modern Orioles fan, look at his baseball savant page. It's red all over, from exit velocity, bat speed, barrel percentage, hard hit rate, chase rate. He doesn't chase. He doesn't chase out of the zone. He does whiff. He does strike out, but you're going to take that with the other kind of production. And then you go down to the fielding. He's an elite level defender. 83rd percentile arm strength, 97th percentile in range. Yeah, he's a little erratic with the throws sometimes. I'll give you that. That was earlier in the season. He's been pretty locked in recently, but that's maybe the only thing you can knock him on. Speed in 89th percentile. His base running value is in the 96th percentile. He did have that one little boneheaded play in the Yankees series, but it didn't hurt him. The Orioles won the game anyway. He's aggressive. He's aggressive on the bases. And again, he's aggressive at the plate, not to a detrimental degree. He's aggressive on the bases, very rarely to a detrimental degree. He's, just a fantastic base runner. He's a joy to watch go station to station, which, that was something of those 2012 to 2016 Orioles. Definitely lacked that athleticism element that Gunnar brings in spades. But look at him in all of baseball this season. Like, this isn't just like an Orioles specific argument that he's fantastic and great. It's a league-wide argument that he is right now all around the best player in baseball. Fangraphs, if you go there and look at their leaderboards, he's got the highest FWAR in the league at 5.9, ahead of Aaron Judge at 5.7. That's because Judge is the more productive hitter. He's got a 215 WRC plus, which gives him an offensive rating of 46.8. Gunnar has a 37.4 offensive rating because he only has a 182 WRC plus. Like I said, Judge hits more home runs, walks a lot more. And that's where Judge, you don't want to say benefits, but does benefit in walks, because nobody wants to pitch to him, because you don't really have to pitch to anybody else in the Yankees order. Whereas Gunnar has been hitting leadoff a lot. If you don't get him out, if you don't give him strikes, you got to face Adley Rutschman with a man on, because Gunnar, as we just learned, is not going to chase the ball. So you got to give him strikes. And yeah, he doesn't always get a hit, but he does a lot of the time. So that's where Gunnar ranks behind Judge, but he's ahead of Judge because of the base running, because of the fielding. Judge, I think, has long been looked at as a very good defender, but that's when he was in right field. Now he's got to play center because the Yankees have Juan Soto, who I think so far this season ranks out as a plus defender, but historically is bad. And we saw in the Orioles-Yankees series him missing a couple catches he should have with balls hit right at him. Then there was a ball in the Mets game last night. It was in the air for forever, and he just didn't catch it. Juan Soto, I think we have enough historical evidence to tell us he's not a good defender. So Judge has to play center, and that hurts him defensively, unfortunately for him, but helps the case here with Gunnar, because Gunnar ranks out at a 7.8 defender. Judge is a negative 3.1, because look, he's not a center fielder. He's doing a job out there for him. He's a good soldier for the Yankees there, but he's not a center fielder, and that's unfortunate for them. And then Judge is basically an average base runner. He's not particularly fast, but competent. He's a competent base runner, but doesn't necessarily have the physical traits to, steal you a bunch of bases and take a bunch of extra bags, whereas Gunnar does. So again, Aaron Judge is a fantastic player. Does a lot of things great, and any team would be lucky to have him on their roster. But in this argument, he loses a little bit because he's not a good defender because of the way he's positioned now, and he's not a fantastic base runner. Gunnar is fantastic in both of those aspects. And then, home run numbers, where Judge is the better option, but 30 home runs for Judge, 26 for Gunnar. Gunnar has a league-leading 70 runs scored. Gunnar is all the way down at 9th with 57 RBI because he's been leading off most of the season versus hitting in the middle of the order, which is, I think, something Brandon Hyde maybe wants to think about. Not necessarily putting him fourth because that's almost too low, but second or third, where he's still getting up in that first inning every single time because he seems to love the first inning, but potentially on getting, a Jordan Westberg and Adley Rutschman on base in front of him, I think could be pretty beneficial. So we'll see if they do that. But it's all this stuff. He is insane. And I think it's important to slow down sometimes and think and understand that you're watching a great season from a player because we know these don't last forever. I think we know from watching great players that particularly this athleticism portion of their career does not last forever. Power can last, ability to put the ball in play and get hits, that can last a long time. We saw Miguel Cabrera do that for a really long time, even after he got all sorts out of shape and moved over to first base and was, basically a fire hydrant over there at that point. The dude could still hit the ball. David Ortiz, there was never really an athleticism element to David Ortiz's game, but he could hit the ball. Might be the slowest guy in the league, but he could hit the ball. Judge, I foresee something similar to him for him in the future. He's fantastic and I think still has an athletic element to him right now, but we've seen that wane a little bit. Gunner's not going to be this elite level runner and defender for forever. Now he's only 22, turns 23 this week. He should have that element to his game for the next 5 years, but it won't be there for forever. So I think you need to really sit in this right now and say wow, we're watching something very special because I don't know, as an Orioles fan, you've been so used to for 2 decades basically bad baseball and lacking that star power. And it feels like, okay, that's just not a thing that the Orioles get. The Orioles don't get star power. That's not a thing for us. That's what the league has. And the Orioles are here as a placeholder because they have a Baltimore team and the East needs a fifth team. That's how it's felt for most of my life watching baseball. And that means, okay, the best player we get is Brian Roberts or Melvin Mora. That's our one all-star we get. And that's why 2012 to 2016 felt so special. They were getting 5 guys in the All-Star game. They were going to the playoffs. They were going to the ALCS. That wasn't a thing that happened to the Baltimore Orioles. And the Baltimore Orioles, I think, lost a generation of fans a little bit there. There's a lot of people my age. It's like, oh yeah, well, I love the Ravens. I'm even into the Capitals, but I'll go to the Oriole game. But who's on the team? That's like a lot of the conversations you'd have with people that age, my age. And now that's the age of people having kids, and you want to get the kids into the stuff you like, right? Well, the Baltimore Orioles right now are a lot of fun, and they're a lot of fun because Gunnar Henderson plays the most exciting brand of baseball that there is. He hits home runs, he steals bases, he makes great plays in the field. He isn't too serious about anything. He has a Gwen Stefani song as his walk up. He does a Pirates of the Caribbean celebration around second base. He is a dork with Legos and is totally comfortable in that. This isn't a guy trying to be too cool for anything. He just is him. He plays baseball his way, and I think the baseball world is aware of him. I think Baltimore is aware of him, and that's fantastic. And I think he should be one of the faces of baseball, and he's not yet. It's still Aaron Judge, and I get that. But Gunnar is a more exciting player than Aaron Judge. I think Gunnar lacks a smugness that Aaron Judge brings, and Aaron Judge has been in the league for a long time and won some MVPs and played a lot of really good years. But Gunnar Henderson is a more likable type person, I think, than Aaron Judge. And right now on the field, in terms of the whole game, he's playing better baseball than Aaron Judge on a better team than Aaron Judge. I know the record is what the record says it is. The Yankees have a better record right now, but I don't know. You look at the games, the Orioles are a more exciting watch. They're deeper. Yes, they need some pitching. They can go get that. Gunnar Henderson is a huge part of that, and all the Orioles need to do is win a World Series, and I think that's going to launch him into the stratosphere of athletic stardom because he has all the elements there. And we're really witnessing something special. And I hope the Orioles recognize that too. Will they sign him to a long-term deal? I don't know. I hope they do. Because yeah, right now it's so much fun to watch him every single game, and you basically know you're going to get an alert every day or two that he hit a home run. You're going to get an alert that he hit a double and scored 2. Like that's his game, and it's something that I've never had on my favorite team. And it's, if you are a Ravens fan, it feels very similar to Lamar Jackson becoming the quarterback for the Ravens. It was, years of good teams for the Ravens case, in the Ravens case, but never that star at quarterback. It was amazing when Joe Flacco was the quarterback and was like competent under center and could find receivers open. And yeah, he had the dumb-headed play every now and then, but I think in the aggregate, Joe Flacco was a benefit to the Ravens and obviously helped them win a Super Bowl. Lamar is like another leap. If Joe Flacco was Brian Roberts, Gunnar is Lamar Jackson. The style they play with, I think both of them are humble type guys. They they get the limelight because they are just that good, but they don't seem like the type of guys that are seeking it overly. They just, want what is deserved to be theirs. And it's very cool if you are a dual Baltimore sports fan to have both of them at the same time. Potentially, I understand Mahomes is Mahomes, but Lamar is a top quarterback. Gunnar is a top player, the top shortstop in baseball. And it's really special if you are a Ravens and Orioles fan to have both of them, and there's a lot of parallels there. But I just wanted to get all that out to say that we're witnessing something very special with Gunnar Henderson. I'm sure most of us do appreciate it, and if we're not, we need to, because we should understand that this is fleeting. This will not be for forever. Gunnar will not be this level of player for forever. This could be his peak. Maybe he gets better, but this could be his peak. And if it is, it's a heck of a peak, even if it's at 22, 23 years old. There's no shame in this being the absolute best season of your life, because wow, it is a doozy. He should be the all-star starter at shortstop. I don't know why I said shortstop that way. Right now, he is the MVP to me. I get the Judge has maybe higher offensive numbers, but man, the full game of baseball, nobody is doing it better than Gunnar Henderson right now, and it's just really special to watch. So wanted to put that out there. Not a hot take or a unique perspective, as I said, but still worth saying and worth reiterating for as long as it's happening, because man, it is a joy to watch. But that is all I wanted to get into. Orioles got a big series this weekend with the Texas Rangers. I don't know. I guess it's as big as any other series. You want to avenge the ALDS sweeping a little bit and get back on track of winning more games than you lose. And hopefully they do that this week. Corbin Burns is on the mound tonight as I record. And like I said, 2 games on national television, first on Fox on Saturday and then on ESPN Sunday. So if you need to check your listings, do that now to make sure you can check those games out. If you liked what you heard, please get involved with the podcast. We're on YouTube. You just search the Warehouse Podcast. We'll pop up there. Give us a subscription. It's free. If you're watching the video on YouTube, please give this a like and comment about Gunnar Henderson. And is he the greatest Oriole of your lifetime? And if he's not, maybe you're a little older than I am. That's great. Tell me about Cal or Brooks or Boog or Frank or Jim or whoever you think is the best of your lifetime. I would love to hear about it. You can also tweet at us at the Warehouse Pod. We're on Threads, also at the Warehouse Pod. And if you want, you can email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. That is all I have for today's episode. We will be back on Monday with another episode recapping the Texas Rangers series a little bit and potentially digging into any other interesting topics that might pop up over this long weekend. But yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Tyler. This has been the Warehouse Podcast, and I'll see you next time.